Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Communication in Times of Crisis with Elly Baxter. My name's Laura and it's a pleasure to be with you today for what's going to be a really valuable session. I would like to start by warmly acknowledging the traditional owners of countries throughout Australia, including where you are today. I myself join you from Gadigal land in the Eora Nation and I pay my deep respect to elders past, present and future. If you'd like to share an acknowledgement of the country you're on today, please do so with us in the chat. Currently on screen is a blue PowerPoint holding slide with text and video boxes of our guest and our Auslan interpreter, Shavoy. I am a woman in my mid-30s. I have fair skin, dark brown hair. I'm wearing a cream woolly jumper and I'm sitting in my house with a watercolour painting behind me. Welcome to Creative Connections, everyone. In a minute, I will introduce you to our excellent guest speaker and host for today's session, Elly Baxter, who will present a series of ideas, strategies, and techniques for communication in times of crisis. We are now well into the Creative Connections series, and we hope you have found the sessions useful and engaging. The sessions are designed for you, our sector, and to provide time and space to come together regularly to support one another and to share in the challenges we are all facing, collectively and in isolation. As we begin to emerge from lockdown with a sense of anticipation and apprehension, for me at least, uncertainty seems certain. We are moving from the initial crisis towards the future, our recovery, planning and building this new world, and supporting our organisations and sector. Today's session with Elly is a crucial part of this conversation of how we might move forward, and we hope it is helpful for you. Before I hand over to Elly, I'd like to go through some of the features and housekeeping of today's session. Firstly, as always, live captioning is available. If it's not on screen now, you can turn it on by pressing the CC button at the bottom of the Zoom window, or alternatively via the stream text feature. The link for this is in the chat. We will be running the chat feature throughout today's session, and Ian from our team will be looking after this. We encourage and invite you to share any links, ideas, resources with each other throughout the session. We'll also be running a Q&A with Elly at the end of the session. So if you have a question for Elly, please add it to the Q&A box again at the bottom of the screen. We're going to do our best to get to all of the questions, but if we run out of time, you can always email us at leadershipprogram@australiacouncil.gov.au. If you're having any tech issues throughout the session or something isn't working, you can use the raise hand feature again at the bottom of the screen, and Kevin will be in touch with you to sort it out. And finally, as always, we are recording today's session. It will be published on our website along with all of our previous sessions, so you can head here to catch up on any webinars that you've missed or to share it with anyone that you think might be interested. Before we start, I just wanted to let you know and remind you that the First Nations Arts Awards are happening this Wednesday, the 27th of May. And this year, it's going to be live online from 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. If you are interested to register and attend the events, you can do so via our website and celebrate some of just the incredible work of the artists as part of the awards. Also later today, we're hosting the First Nations Roundtable. These roundtables happen every Friday at 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And is hosted by Wesley Enoch and Leanne Buckskin. Everyone is welcome. Also, we're very excited to be sharing with you in the next coming days some new sessions for our Creative Connections series. These sessions were proposed by you and will add more depth, support and guidance to the unprecedented adaptation we are all experiencing. These sessions, alongside our existing sessions, look at how we adapt our leadership, our digital capabilities, and our practice to this new world. So check back to our website in the coming days to register for these sessions. Okay, so it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker and host for today's session. Currently on screen is a blue PowerPoint slide with the name Elly Baxter and an image of a woman with fair skin, blonde hair, wearing a navy dress and standing outside in the street. Elly Baxter is a PR expert. She has over a decade of experience working in the arts and more broadly, crafting communication strategies and campaigns with many leading organisations and companies. Speaking with Elly, she is deeply passionate about the arts and the role of communications in building the strength, success and capacity of our sector. She has a wealth of knowledge and practical tools to share with us today. As we discussed, no one planned for this crisis or had a pandemic communication strategy on hand. Everyone has been working furiously to make sense, both internally and externally, of their organisations, audiences and practices. As we move into the third month and the initial crisis has calmed, what is the role of communications in our work? What do we need to do to plan for now and for next? How do we think strategically about how we communicate with our stakeholders and nurture our relationships? It gives me great pleasure to hand over to Elly to tackle some of these big questions. Thanks so much, Elly, for joining us, and I think you've got some slides to share.
I do. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I will share my screen now. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge that I too am on Aboriginal land. I'm on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders, past and present. I acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. The opening slide has a graphic of a newspaper called Good Newspaper. It's on a graphic background and it says communication in times of crisis. So I want to start this presentation just by setting you the ground rules that I made for myself in creating this. It's a little bit different to how I would present a hypothetical plan for crisis communications, because we are obviously in the midst of a crisis, and rather than stepping out and pretending that's not happening and just talking about it in the abstract, I've really designed this presentation around what you can be doing now to prepare for what's to come. I've also...
Sorry, I'm going to quickly interrupt because we can't see your slides up on screen, and I know they're excellent, so it would be great if everybody could see them.
Let me just make sure I've got this right.
That looks perfect. That's great.
Thank you, Laura. I apologise, a little bit of tech confusion there. You can now see the slide that I was describing. Yes, so I've designed this presentation as a what to do here, from here and now. I've also tried to make it relevant for both independent artists, people in small organisations and people in large organisations. And hopefully there will be some insights that will be relevant to you if you are a communications professional in the arts, but also if you are an artist or you work in another administration role, that this will be helpful to you in thinking about how you will communicate. I'm also assuming that you might have a little bit more time to devote to things outside of your regular day-to-day practice or work because of the shutdown. So I apologise if you're not in that situation and you're busier than ever, but I have created some suggestions around potentially having more capacity than you usually would without the day-to-day rigours of your roles. So to orient, we're going to go through 4 stages of crisis communications. This is a text-only slide. All of the text-only slides are in white, pink, and navy. And this goes through the stages that we're going to look at. So we're going to start with an analysis of the situation that we're in now. We're going to go back to some foundations and look at how you can review those foundations, make sure that they're solid before moving forward, preparing for the next stages of this pandemic, taking action, reviewing your action, and then looking forward to what you'll be doing at the end of the crisis to evaluate how your communications plan has run. So we're starting with analysis, and this slide has a photo of a woman holding binoculars because she's looking at the situation. I want to introduce you to a concept that was quite new to me that I think could be really useful. But before I do that, I'm going to run through what we're facing now. So we're about 10 weeks into the shutdown. We know that some restrictions are easing, and I'm hearing that some arts venues will be reopening in the not too distant future. The focus is definitely shifting from containment to recovery. And when you look at what's being said in the news, what the government is talking about, it's much less about shutting down and keeping us safe from the virus, and much more shifting focus towards how do we reopen the economy and stimulate growth and jobs. And we know from some excellent research that the Australia Council commissions that audiences are eager to return to the arts. They want to come back at the same level or perhaps even more than they attended before. And this is a great sign. But we also know that they're concerned about safety and that they don't want to rush back. And we can probably anticipate several more months of shutdown for most major arts events where there are large audiences. Now, this concept that I wanted to introduce to you, which is relatively new to me, called the OODA loop. I think it's a great model for how to conduct analysis in a really difficult situation. So we start with observe, and at this point we want to gather as much relevant information as we can so that we know we're making our decisions really well informed. The next step is to orient. So that's taking all of that information and looking at how it applies to you, to your practice, to your organisation and your specific circumstances. From there, we move on to deciding what you're going to do, and then finally to act. And it's a loop because you will continually go through this cycle as a crisis unfolds. And what you'll find is that the sense of urgency in the crisis, the loops will speed up and slow down. So you would think, at the beginning of the crisis, when we were in the very early days, when suddenly events and performances were being cancelled, you'd be in a very fast cycle where you would be wanting to go through this OODA loop probably every couple of days and reassess as things were changing very rapidly. So we're now in more of a holding pattern. You would slow down the cycles, and you might be doing a cycle once a week, once a fortnight, to really get a sense of how things have changed and shifted and how you need to respond to them. So how do we collect this information that we need to make decisions? The first thing I would recommend is media monitoring, and this slide has photos of newspaper, TV, radio and typewriter. And what I would recommend is that you set up a process of daily media monitoring. If you're within an organisation, it may already be somebody's job to do this. If it's not, I would suggest starting it. You could start a roster so it's not the same person every day, but it's about looking at what is in the media about the arts sector, what is the government saying about the arts sector, but also more generally, what is the mood and context that we're in. So at the moment, I would say the context is very much about how will the economy recover, and a lot of talk from economists and business people about wanting to end the shutdown and move into getting people back into jobs. So that's the context in which you'll be thinking about how you communicate your messages. You should pull resources. So if you're on your own as an independent artist, perhaps you could reach out to some friends and colleagues and again create a roster of who's going to do a daily media monitoring, and it can just be a short email that you share just so you feel really confident that you know what's happening in the world. And it's a great time to talk to journalists if you have those connections, if you work in the media, or if you have been regularly interviewed by some journalists. It's a great time to reach out to them. And it's a really good time to talk to people. I'm going to keep coming back to this. I know particularly younger generations are very adverse to using the phone, but it's such an important tool and it's more important than ever right now. So I would really encourage you to pick up the phone. And on this slide, we have a photograph of a woman with an old-fashioned phone looking very surprised to be talking on the phone. You will get sick of me saying this, but you need to talk to people. It's extremely important. It's how you build relationships. It's how you gather information. So really think about picking up the phone and talking to people and learning as much as you can so that your analysis is really well informed. And you want to collaborate. You want to look at who you can work with. Who are your unusual allies in this situation? It's a really good time to forget about competition and really think about how you can work together across the industry and sector. And on this slide, we've got photos of a workplace team and a sporting team collaborating. I very strongly believe that in the arts, competition is simply not relevant. When people have a great experience of the arts, they want to attend more arts events. So it's in all of our best interests for everyone to be thriving. And particularly now, when we're in such a difficult situation, it's a fantastic time to create allies with counterparts at other organisations. Something I've noticed is that the senior leadership teams are really good at collaborating. They have formal structures in place, like in the performing arts, the AMPAG group and the cast group, but we're less good at doing that a little bit further down. So if you're at a manager or coordinator level, now is a really great time to reach out to your counterparts at other organisations and see how you can support each other and really foster those relationships and work together to, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's also a really good time to think about if you need professional assistance. And this slide has a photo of a brain wearing stethoscopes. You need to think about what situation you're facing. How serious is the crisis for you as an artist or for your organisation? What's your capacity? Do you have someone on staff whose job is to manage communications in the crisis, or do you not? And what's your budget? So if you do find that you're in a really serious situation and that you don't have the capacity within your organisation to respond, and you do have the budget, I would highly recommend hiring a crisis communications specialist, and that can really help you to protect the reputation of your organisation or yourself as an artist. Of course, I also know that budgets are extremely tight at the moment, so it's a really good time to reach out to collaborators or friends that you may have who have communications experience, who might be generous enough to offer you some guidance and support. Don't go it alone. Make sure you're reaching out and asking for help. So moving on to the next stage, we're going to talk about foundations. And this slide has a picture of a woman putting on foundation. So it's a really good time to come back to the foundations of your communication strategy, and that's your brand and the relationships that you have. Now, talking about branding can feel really awkward and cringy. You know, when people talk about their personal brand, it can make people sound a bit naff. But what your brand really is just how you communicate who you are or who your organisation is to the world. It's about the images that you use, it's about the words that you use, and it's a really important way of setting the tone for what your brand is. And this slide has a photograph of a blonde woman speaking into a big red megaphone. So it's a really good time to think about what are the components of your brand. And you may have a beautiful professionally designed brand and style guide and it's all very clear and put out, or you might not have really thought about it before, but you have a brand whether you think about it or not. And that's part of how your audience expects to hear from you. So they expect from you a sense of consistency and certainty. They want to know what they're hearing, and they want to when you communicate with them, they have an understanding of what to expect from you. And that's really important. And that might have changed in recent times. You may have consciously or unconsciously adjusted your brand to the circumstances. For example, if you have a brand which is telling off-color jokes on social media, which is great, I love that, but you might have shifted that slightly during the pandemic because it might not have felt appropriate. So just think about how your brand might have shifted. And then moving forward, you want to think about when is the time to shift back, if that's what you want to do, or if you want to evolve your brand and change it slightly, thinking strategically about how you can take your audience with you towards the new brand that you're creating. So it's not a shock, so they're not suddenly hearing something completely different from you. This slide is about relationships, and we've got two women in business suits. So now's a fantastic time to really do an audit of the relationships that you have, and the relationships with your audience, with your supporters, might be with your donors. You may want to look at your relationships with other industry partners, funding partners, government and media, and have a look at how those relationships have shifted and changed. And if there are any gaps that you can see where there are relationships missing, where it would be really helpful for you to cultivate relationships for now and for the future. And what we've seen at this time is that this pandemic has impacted the arts industry so seriously that there's a lot of goodwill towards arts practitioners and arts workers. People are really understanding how difficult this time is. So it could be a really good time to ask for favors, to ask for support now when people are feeling generous towards the sector. And how do we build those relationships? We pick up the phone. I told you you were going to get sick of me saying this. This is another slide with a woman talking on a phone, looking very surprised to be on the phone. Reach out to people. You will be amazed how many people will be so happy to support you, to help you in any way that they can if you ask them, if you approach them, if you pick up that phone and make that call. So now we're moving into the preparation stage. And what we need to do now is get ready for the next stage of the crisis situation that we are in. So what I would recommend doing is developing a crisis plan. This slide has a woman reading a sheet of paper coming off a typewriter as she prepares to write her crisis plan. And this slide, we start talking about the crisis plan, the pink typewriter. So what I would say is absolutely essential is developing a plan for what's likely in the next 6 months. We know that things are going to be very unusual and difficult to predict, but you really need to think through what are your expectations over the next 6 months? What happens when events start up again? What will you need to communicate to your audience about conditions when they can come back? And how can you make that as clear as possible? And sadly, also thinking through where you'll be at in terms of business operations. We have, of course, already seen a major company go into administration, and sadly, it probably won't be the last. So we need to be preparing for those really difficult news cycles. And if you have the time, it's a great time to lean into longer term planning and addressing a range of scenarios within your crisis plan. You could think about things that you've experienced in the past that would be great to have on paper so you know what to do next time, and also thinking more widely about what happens if there's a fire at your venue. How would you respond to that, and making sure that you've got all of that documented so that you're not completely caught unawares in the time of a crisis in the future. So this is a text slide that talks about what goes into a crisis plan. So you want to start by outlining the goal of a crisis plan, and it might be something like this plan creates a structure for communicating with internal and external stakeholders in the event of a crisis that affects our reputation or the normal business functions. Within that plan, you really need to go through the hierarchy of who is permitted to speak for your organisation or for you, and in which circumstances they should speak, and who is the backup. So you need to think, if the crisis is of a nature that your normal spokesperson, perhaps your CEO or artistic director, is not able to be the spokesperson, who would be the next person in line, and how would you prepare those people for a crisis situation? You want to think about who would be your key stakeholders that you would need to address in a time of crisis. You know, your audience, the media, the industry. You might have funding partners or government partners who would be really important for you to communicate with. And then go through and develop a range of scenarios. So things that you are anticipating now, things that we expect will happen over the next few months as restrictions are eased. But also, as I said, if you have the capacity to expand this out as a more generalized crisis plan, think about documenting things that have happened in the past. It could be, you know, really simple things like a performance has to be cancelled because of cast illness. And that might be something that happens a couple of times a year, but you've never written down exactly what happens. And just to write that down and have that in place. Or as I said, it might be something much more unlikely, like a fire. But just having those ideas written down that you can adapt quickly in a new crisis. And once you've identified those key spokespeople, you need to do some sort of media training with them. And so this slide has a picture of an old-fashioned microphone on a yellow background. You need to come up with key messages about what you want to say. And then so ideally you would want to do media training with a professional, but if that's not an option, this is just a quick overview of how you would run some media training. You could do this with your artistic director if they're going to be the spokesperson. You could run this with a friend if you're an independent artist, just to be prepared in a media situation. So you need to prepare key messages. You should always go into an interview with 2 or 3 key phrases of what you want to get across in that interview. You should rehearse answering hard questions, but also easy questions. Often journalists are busy and they're not being mean or harsh, and they may just trip you up with a really easy question. So practice those questions. Practice redirection, which is about coming back to those key messages that you want to get across. It's something you'll hear politicians doing all the time. So, for example, in an arts context, you might be asked the question, the interviewer may say, we see that your audience numbers are down this year. And one of your key messages might be that you've had a 50% increase in school attendances. So you might answer that question by saying, yes, we have seen a small decline in general audiences, but what we're extremely proud of is a 50% growth in visitor numbers from schools. And that's building the audiences of the future. And that's something we're really committed to and passionate about. So you can see how you kind of bringing the question back around to what you want to be talking about. And also practice declining questions. It's absolutely okay to refuse to answer something if it's something that you don't want to say, but you just need to be prepared for that. And so you might say something like, oh, I'm not the right person to answer that question, or I don't have that information on hand, I'm sorry. And also practice declining photo setups. Sometimes a photographer will have a quirky idea about something they want you to do. And particularly in a time of crisis, when the story might be quite serious, having a picture of you doing something silly will be a disconnect and won't look great. So it's great to have some ideas already in place for photo setups that you can offer instead, rather than being cajoled into doing something that you wouldn't usually for a photo. So we've done our preparation and we're ready for action. And this slide has a photograph of a woman taking off in her car, ready to take action. And the first thing I want to say when you come to communicating is to tell the truth. And this slide has a photograph of a pink boat at a protest with "Tell the Truth" written on it. There's a lot of misconception, particularly in popular culture, that PR people or spin doctors don't tell the truth, that we lie. That's not the case. Well, it shouldn't be the case. Always tell the truth. Your job is to put the truth in the best possible light. So don't lie. Always tell the truth. It will catch up with you. It's going to create more problems in the future. Always stick to the truth and find the best way to present it. So you want to develop those key messages that we touched on back when we were talking about media training, and you want them to be clear and precise with really simple language that anyone could understand, and you want to repeat and reinforce those key messages across every piece of communication that you're putting out there. People want you to be consistent. They want to understand where you're coming from, and you will offer trust, and people will feel trust and security when you are consistent with your messaging. Then you want to identify your audiences, and these slides are text-only slides. So you have your audience, your supporters, your people who come and experience your art. You have your digital audience who may only interact with you on social media or on your email list. You have donors, industry, government, a whole lot of different stakeholders, and each of them will need to be communicated to in different ways. So you want to match your message to your audience. So if you think about how you would explain something to someone who follows you on Twitter, that might be very different to the way you would want to speak to a funding partner or government. So you need to be thinking about, once you've established what those key messages are, how are you going to communicate those effectively to each audience segment? And then you want to think about which platform is the best communications platform to reach each segment. So some of those platforms might be social media, it might be an email list, it might be placing a story in the press, so that a wide cross-section of the community is seeing it. It might be more direct communications, and critically, where people are significant and important stakeholders, pick up the phone and talk to them. I told you you'd get sick of this. It's really, really important to talk to people directly. And it's also really important to think about the order in which people receive communications. You really don't want to be in a situation where a board member hears something in the media before they've been told that information, or that you've put something on Facebook saying a performance has been cancelled before you contacted the cast and let them know. So you also want to think about the order in which you're communicating with people, and that's something that's really important. So once you've established those key messages, you then want to go through and do an audit of all of your messaging, all of the public facing elements of your brand, of your organization, of your work. And this slide has a photograph of a woman on a laptop. So you want to go to your website and you want to make sure that the information is front and center. I've looked at a lot of arts organizations' websites in the weeks or two after the shutdown, and many of them didn't have anything prominent to say that they were closed, that performances weren't happening. I had to scroll right down the bottom to the footer where there was a news story that explained that a season had been cancelled or an event had been cancelled. So you want to just look at everything with fresh eyes, as if you've never seen it before. What's the most important message that needs to get out there? So having a look at your website above the fold, looking at your social media, how can you use headers? How can you use your avatar? How can you use your bios and pinned posts to make sure that that crucial information is really out there? If you have a venue, looking at the signage at the venue. If someone turns up for a performance that's cancelled, is there a really clear and obvious signage so that they know what's happening and a number for them to call? And on that, thinking about if you have a recorded phone message, making sure that that's been updated in case anyone's trying to contact you and they need to understand what's happening. And then do it again. This slide has a woman having her hair shampooed and it says rinse and repeat. The thing in these situations is that you can't over communicate. You really need to tell people and tell them again, make it really, really clear. So when we're looking at a scenario like the one we're in now, which is a global crisis that is affecting everyone, you've got to remember that everyone is distracted, everyone is confused, everyone is afraid. So they need that messaging to come through multiple times for them to absorb it. And you also got to remember, when you're in a smaller scale crisis that just affects you or your organization, it seems like the biggest thing in the world to you, but it's not to anyone else. So even though you may feel like you're communicating to death, you're not. You really need to repeat messages for people to understand them. We also have a really exciting opportunity right now, I think, to surprise and delight our audiences. So while we have this time where we're not doing our business as usual, have a think about what you can do to love bomb your audience. You know, can you arrange for your artistic director or artists that you regularly work with to make some phone calls to your audience members, and have a chat with them about their work? I think that's something that would absolutely tickle me pink if I picked up my phone and it was an actor from a show I'd seen last year. That would be a really great way to keep those connections going. We think about how the government has put workers on JobKeeper to keep them connected to their employer. So thinking about how you can put your audience on Audience Keeper to keep them connected to you. You might want to send personal letters, personal emails, Facebook messages if you only communicate through a Facebook page. How could you do private things online like masterclasses or special presentations, behind the scenes, readings of new work, that sort of thing, really to kind of keep those audiences close to you. So once you've implemented that plan, we're going to review that, and we're going to think back to that OODA loop of how we want to keep going back around and making sure that our messaging is staying current. So this is the review slide, and there's a woman reading a book. So you want to continue that monitoring. You want to think about which messages are working, what's changed, how do you need to adjust your messages to suit the new circumstances, and making sure you pick up the phone and talk to people so that you can find out about how those messages are landing, where people are at and what they're doing. And this slide again has a woman on the phone. And we're back to rinse and repeat again. Again, you can't over communicate. You just need to keep going back with that key messaging, keeping people engaged, making sure they know what you're up to, and they're feeling secure and confident in your brand and in your presence throughout difficult times. And so finally, we've come to the end of the crisis, and you just want to fall asleep and never think about it again. But this is a great time to evaluate and learn from what's happened. And so this slide has a picture of a woman with binoculars having a look at what's happened. One of the things I really strongly recommend throughout all times through the crisis, and right at the end if you haven't done it throughout, is to make a lot of notes. You will forget things. You'll talk to a lot of people and you'll get things muddled in your head. And when you've been through a crisis, particularly one where you're at the center of a news storm, you have journalists and editors and producers coming out of nowhere who are valuable contacts, and you want to make sure you've kept a note of all of those people so that you can work with them again into the future. And this slide has a photograph of a woman taking notes. You want to do an internal review of how the plan went and how the communications rolled out. You want to talk to your colleagues and assess within that team. If you're not within an organization, if you're an independent artist, I would really recommend getting together with some colleagues and friends and doing a bit of assessment and review for each other. That would be really helpful. And if you are in an organization, coordinate a review at the senior management and board level to make sure that that assessment is really rigorous and you've all kind of covered off everything that happened and how you can move forward and learn from everything that happened in the situation. If you can, it's a fantastic opportunity to do some research. I would highly recommend, if it's available to you, to hire a research company to do qualitative research. So that means actually conducting interviews with some of your audience members and key stakeholders and gathering information on how your messages were received and how you can improve in the future. Obviously, that's a big investment and a big commitment. If that's not possible, conduct a survey, put it out on SurveyMonkey, offer a prize for for people to respond. And that can be a really helpful way of gathering some information. And you could talk to people. You could pick up the phone and talk to people. You can call your key stakeholders. You can call a selection of audience members, talk to them about what they saw, what they understood, what was missing, and how they felt about how you communicated with them. Then you want to update everything. And this slide has a picture of a woman with a big stack of papers and folders and a pen, and she's updating that crisis plan. So take back out that crisis plan and update it with everything that you've learned. Update your contacts database. As I said, in the times of crisis, you will often have communication with really key people who you would not normally be in touch with. And it's a fantastic opportunity to keep those contacts up to date and keep them close and part of your community. If you have new email lists, new email addresses to add to lists, make sure you update all of those lists. And then you want to go back to that audit that we spoke about earlier of your website, your social media, your venue, and make sure that you're updating all of that message now that things are back to the usual times, and making sure you're using all of those communications platforms to let people know that things are back to normal. And then finally, you want to thank everyone who's helped you throughout the crisis. In terms of maintaining really strong relationships, sending a handwritten thank you note is just the biggest tip I can give anyone. It has an extraordinary impact. People so appreciate being thanked, and particularly with a personal touch of a thank you note. I highly recommend it. And brings me to this final slide, which is a quote that I want to share with you. It's hugely popular and well-known quote from Maya Angelou, because it's so true. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And when we're in a time of crisis, people are afraid, they're unsure, they're insecure. And if you can be really intentional with how you use communications to instill feelings in your audience. So you think about, do you want them to feel comfort? Do you want them to feel excited? Do you want them to feel inspired? And think about how you can use your communications to create that feeling in your audience. Thank you very much. I think it's now time for questions.
Thanks so much, Elly. Gosh, what a great presentation. That was so useful. So many practical tips in there that we can all kind of take home with us. I also just wanted to say your slides were lovely. Thanks so much for putting them together.
Oh, you're so welcome. I like things to be colourful.
And I hope everybody spends their afternoon on the phone, calling all of their people. So thanks so much. We've got a couple of questions that have come through in the Q&A box. And if anyone has any other questions for Elly, we'll try and answer as many as we can. Just add them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. The first one, Elly, if you don't mind, if we just jump straight into it.
Go for it.
Is from Ella. Is it possible to communicate a sense of certainty when we don't have all of the information available ourselves? How much do audience want to know when decisions are on hold?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good point. Saying that things are on hold is a really good suggestion. As I said, like, I'm very passionate about telling the truth and being as transparent and open with your audience as possible. That doesn't mean saying, we're all panicking and freaking out and we have no idea what we're doing, but it might mean saying, what we know now is that we won't be on stage for the next week. We'll let you know more when we know more. That sort of thing. That makes sense.
Cool. Thank you. And we've got another question here from Tracy. I work for a local government organisation and have struggled getting messages out in a timely manner through this crisis because of the need to have so many levels of approval prior to speaking publicly. Have you got any tips on communicating without saying anything? Just keeping people in the holding pattern until the message is all cleared.
Yes, okay, that is a really difficult situation. One thing I would recommend is going back to your crisis plan and talking with, obviously I know there's a lot of hierarchy and processes within a council situation. So I would really recommend, in a time when you're not in crisis, working with the senior management to create a system where when there is a crisis, that we reduce the layers, because it's simply not practical when there's things happening urgently. Obviously, you can't do that now. So yeah, look, there are lots of ways to say something without saying anything. I would recommend being very reassuring, being as confident as you can, and again, being transparent and open. Similar to the answer to the last question, tell them what you do know now, and be clear about when you will be updating them. And then follow through. So be really consistent. If you say you're going to get an update from us in the next week, even if you don't have new information, get back to them within a week and say something else, just so that they know that they can trust and respect you, that when you say you're going to do something, that you will.
Great. Thanks, Elly. And we've got one final question we might just squeeze in before the end. It's from Riona. Could I ask, how do you factor in the accessibility about communication to the audience? As no doubt you have seen interpreting on TV, and I would like to ask if it is possible to include the modes of communication into all aspects of that.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And that's something that is very important, and you will see that shift in crisis times, that there will be interpreters on television. That's really important. And I mean, it's important at all times that all of your communications are accessible as possible. And that's something obviously that the Australia Council does such a good job of, making sure that you have accessibility enabled on your website, that anything that you're putting out on social media has alt text and image captions. But also, if you know that your audience has specific needs, getting directly in contact with them and making sure that they're receiving your communications is a really important step. So I would really recommend, I keep going back to it, but try and contact people directly one-on-one. Obviously that might not be the phone if there are accessibility issues, but if there is that possibility to make that direct one-on-one communication with people and ensure that your messages are accessible, I would highly recommend doing that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Elly. I think that may be all we have time for the questions today. So if we haven't gotten to some of your questions, you can always email us at the leadershipprogram@australiacouncil.gov.au and we'll get back to you. Elly, I just want to say thank you again. That was such a useful session. And I think, as we start to kind of move into the next wave, they're really practical tips that we can all kind of start to integrate into how we work. So thanks so much for that.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I'm very pleased to, and if anyone has further questions, please feel free to email them to the Australia Council. I'm happy to respond.
Thank you. Thank you. And just a reminder that we are, we've got another Creative Connection session happening next Wednesday. Our Wednesday sessions start at 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, and next week we are doing Understanding Technology for Non-Technology People. So it should be a great session, again, really practical on how we can kind of start to think about how we use all these digital platforms that we're all spending so much time with. Inside the Square is also happening on Tuesday, and that's at 2 p.m. and that happens on Zoom and on our Facebook page. And just a reminder again to stay tuned for all of our new Creative Connections sessions that we'll be launching next week. I think that's it. Thank you, Elly. Thanks everybody for joining us. I hope everybody has a lovely, warm weekend. And apologies for my dog barking somewhere during that. All right, bye for now.